So we now turn to the first panel. Thank you very much, Aaron. And I want to introduce the first panel is with John Linton, who is retired in 2015 as Director of the Office of Correctional Education in the Department of Education's Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, OCTE. And you have some fellow colleagues who are in the audience today, and he will introduce the members of his panel.
So thank you, Stephen. I very much appreciate the honor of being involved in today's event and being part of this really important study. I'd like to start by just acknowledging some of the very many individuals that made this study successful and possible. And a number of them are acknowledged in the publication, and those folks, many of them are in the room today, and I extend my word of thanks to them. And there's also three groups of individuals that are a little bit more invisible that I'd also like to acknowledge that were essential to make this possible and successful. One are those correctional officials and the correctional line workers who accommodated the study and agreed to have the study take place in their institutions and supported it with their daily work. Secondly, those individuals, that large cadre of individuals that were willing to go into the institutions and administer the surveys face-to-face with incarcerated individuals. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, are those individuals that are incarcerated and that were chosen at random and that agreed to participate in the study and undertook the assessment and shared their background information. And I think it's reflective of the information that we've heard, some of the information from the survey itself and some of the comments that Aaron made that individuals who are incarcerated often do really respect the importance of having educational opportunities while they're incarcerated and do support the provision of expanded educational programs and improved educational programs and want to work with us to have that happen. So I did say that the study was important, and I truly think that it is. And I'd like to just comment for a moment about why I think it's so important that we get this type of information and take advantage of it when it is available. I think we've reached, to some extent, a bipartisan consensus in this country that we've overly invested in corrections and that we're embarrassed by our current situation of mass incarceration, and that we'd like to walk back some of the policies and practices that have got us into this situation. So we're looking often at that challenge in the context of what's often being referred to as justice reinvestment. That's the term that's being used in my home state of Maryland for a bipartisan initiative to try to find ways to reduce prison incarceration and what some of the wasteful spending associated with over-incarceration. And if we look at justice reinvestment from the standpoint of what do we know about what we can do better or more effectively, we realize that we've really been over-investing in what I might refer to as kind of bare bones incarceration. We have a lot of people incarcerated in very large institutions, very little programming space, very little opportunities for employment or education. And that if we want to do something more than provide incapacitation, we really want to provide opportunities for human development within our correctional institutions, that we need to support intelligently other opportunities. So we look at justice reinvestment from the standpoint of reducing the wasteful spending to have too many people incarcerated for too long, and we look at ways that we can divert some of that funding for prevention programs and other improvements in our criminal justice programs. We also need to look at opportunities to make an investment of some of those resources in better opportunities for recreation, religious programming, drug treatment program, education, just generally to enrich the opportunities for individuals to develop during a period of incarceration, and for our correctional institutions to really appropriately be referred to as correctional institutions, because something's happening more than just incapacitation. There really is some opportunities for rehabilitation in terms of those. So if we're interested in improving opportunities for development within the sphere of education, we certainly need to take advantage of all the information that we can get in terms of the educational profile, educational needs, and related information as it pertains to education. So this is a treasure trove of that type of information that we need to take full advantage of and put to use in terms of improving and expanding our correctional education opportunities in the nation's prisons. I wanted to mention three particular findings related to the most recent PIAAC study, and also kind of growing out of the two prior assessments of the U.S. prison population. And I think the most obvious point is the low level of educational attainment of the incarcerated population. And we've heard and seen some of the statistics already today that show that we have a very limited number of individuals who've had any opportunity for advanced education or incarcerated in our institutions today. And we certainly are overrepresenting individuals that are school dropouts or people that have done nothing beyond the high school completion. And I think combined with that, the information that we've seen again in different ways that individuals who are incarcerated are not content with their current level of educational attainment, that they do seek and desire opportunities to develop further. And this is information that's consistent across the three studies going over the past 30 years, both the interest in education and the undereducation of the population. Second, I think a factor that unfortunately doesn't come out fully in this report, but I think we'll see it more as we get a chance to dive into the data. And it was really brought home to me as I reviewed the 2003 assessment. And that is the very high proportion of individuals who are incarcerated whose highest level of educational attainment was the GED certificate. And to my particular view, we've been somewhat obsessed with GED attainment in our correctional institutions. It was actually the biggest distinction, statistical distinction between the household population and the incarcerated population in the 2003 assessment, where literally 5 times as many individuals in the prison population attained a high school diploma as their highest level of educational attainment compared to the household population. So it's an overwhelmingly a large proportion of people that are incarcerated that have had a high school completion. And this is kind of interesting from a couple of standpoints. One is that we know that individuals with a GED really do struggle to move forward from that level in terms of moving into post-secondary education or into advanced occupational training. We really need to find ways to support their development beyond the GED. And also it speaks to our practices in correctional education. I think Aaron gave us a little bit of a glimpse of this, that we've been really kind of desperate in terms of our practices to provide as many opportunities for people to attain a GED as possible. But as a side effect of that, what's happened is as we've engaged people in educational enterprise during the period of their incarceration, and these individuals begin to make significant progress and to demonstrate some attainment through their performance on that high school assessment, that our response to that is literally to expel those individuals from educational programs. We've done that because we've been very interested in being able to bring other individuals in and provide a GED opportunity to as many individuals as possible. But it seems to me in retrospect, and I say in retrospect because I've been part of that operation for some number of decades in my home state, that we really perhaps did a disservice to those individuals who are really beginning to develop educationally, to move them out of those educational programs and often offer no additional opportunity for them to pursue education after that period of time. And then the third point that I wanted to make in terms of things that grabbed me about this assessment, and again, this does emerge very clearly in this report. Aaron also brought it out, and we can see it in the two prior prison assessments, and that is this kind of surprising discrepancy between performance and language skills and in numeracy in the prison population. So a little bit counterintuitive, because we expect a male population to be higher in their numerical skills or math skills and lower in their language skills, but we see very consistently the discrepancy with the prisoners performing low on their numerical skills compared to their level of educational attainment and compared to the household population. And the figures of that, as I say, are quite consistent and quite noticeable in terms of how large that discrepancy is between what we might expect. I don't think we know why that is the case. I have a couple of theories, and we have time we might want to discuss that. But I think it has some serious implications for what we're doing in correctional education and what we might want to do. One of the challenges that we face with our correctional education programs is it's very difficult, very challenging to recruit and to retain qualified math instructors. So we've had difficulty getting up quality services. But I think it's quite interesting to note that remediation in math skills, there's, I think, a very significant possibility to address that more effectively and more efficiently, more creatively by the use of instructional technology, and especially as we've gotten more intelligent types of computer resources applied to instructional technology, that it's possible to use computer-aided instruction and computer-assisted instruction to identify and fill gaps in knowledge. And so I think that's a little bit of a promising approach that we might find that we're able to do a much better job of addressing this really important aspect of the educational profile by using instructional technology. And I think this is also particularly important for post-release employment, and also a big challenge to those that are trying to provide challenging and appropriate and high-demand areas of occupational training during the period of incarceration. So those are things we can discuss more if we have an opportunity, but I want to allow my two colleagues on this panel to have a little opportunity to speak as well. You have the biographical information from my two colleagues. I'm very honored to be on the panel with these two individuals, Mr. Fred Patrick, who's to my left, and Dr. John Nally, who's on the screen. Thank you for being here, John. Thank you for being here, Fred. Fred Patrick is with the Vera Institute of Justice, and he's been a very important figure in recent years with regard to efforts to put up opportunities for post-secondary education in our correctional institutions. And Fred also is playing a role, an important initiative at Vera to encourage a relook at the role of prisons in our society and to examine what prisons could and should be in our society. And John Nally, who will speak after Fred, is a distinguished colleague, a well-known figure in the field of correctional education. John has been doing very extensive work as the Director of Correctional Education in Indiana to put up successful occupational training programs. And I particularly respect some of John's work as he's tried to and has consistently engaged with this employment community in his state and used that information to inform their practices with regard to occupational training. And John has also been a leader in terms of using post-release outcome research to inform their occupational and other types of educational programs in the Indiana Department of Corrections. So let me turn first to Fred to add his comments to mine.
Thank you. I think I want to further amplify John's message of how do we situate these findings in the context of this era of mass incarceration. So 2.2 million people incarcerated in the U.S., roughly 25% of the world's prison population. We know that over 600,000 people are coming home each year, returning to communities. We know that 2.2 million sort of represents an incarceration rate that's 5 to 10 times higher than most other Western democracies. And we also know that between 1970 and 2010, that 700% increase in incarceration in the U.S. was mostly concentrated among those without post-secondary education. We also know about the spatial inequality of incarceration and mass incarceration. So you have places like West Garfield Park, Illinois, which has there's a 40% difference between the incarceration rate in that minority community and the highest ranking white community. We know that parents, because we want to put the human face on the data and the statistics, so we know that 52% of those incarcerated in state prisons are parents, 63% in the federal prisons, which also means conversely that 7% of all children in the U.S. under the age of 18 have parents who are either incarcerated or were previously incarcerated. And when we think about the effect that the impact of a parent's education has on that of the child, it becomes important that we make that connection. So what I want to talk about specifically now are a few of the takeaways from the findings. The fact that 94% of the individuals in the survey who are in prison do not have a post-secondary education compared to 64% in the general household population. That's important because we live in a world now in which the latest research suggests that 2/3 of all job vacancies by 2020, just 4 years down the road, will require some form of post-secondary education and training. So if we want to make the connection between incarceration, reentry, people coming home and getting jobs, we're living in an economy that requires now something more than the GED, as John talked about. And sort of, we've done a lot in terms of making GED and high school equivalency available in prisons, but the reality is we live in a very different world where that's quite frankly not good enough. The second point I want to take is that 66% of all those in the survey were working prior to incarceration, because I want to use that to highlight the disruptive effect that incarceration has on families. Now remember, these are individuals who are in state and federal prisons, which means they spent some time in jail before getting to prison. So when you think about it, you had individuals who were working, and many of them probably were detained pre-trial, even though they could have been safely in the community possibly, while going back and forth to court. It maybe would have had a better shot at avoiding long-term incarceration. But it's important to know that when we incarcerate, you're impacting directly not only that individual but families and children. And similarly, when we educate and provide education in prisons, you're also impacting in a positive way families and children. The next point I wanted to make was that the data showed that skill certification, those with skill certificates had higher literacy and numeracy rates. Makes sense. Education does a lot of good for us. We were taught that at an early age. It teaches you to think better and read better and write better and communicate, all the sort of skills one needs to navigate life outside of the prison walls. I found it interesting that 58% of those did not complete any additional level of education while incarcerated. So that means an opportunity for individuals to productively and positively engage while incarcerated did not happen. It's possible that one of the reasons why it didn't happen is because of the lack of capacity. When you look at need or demand versus capacity, according to this data, 70% of the individuals wanted to enroll, 21% were actually enrolled, 25% were on a waiting list. So that gets at a capacity issue and whether or not we are doing all that we could be doing within prison to provide education, all levels of education. And it's also important to note that 69% of that 70% who wanted to enroll wanted post-secondary education, either an associate's or certificate from a post-secondary institution, etc. And why does this all matter? Importantly, it matters because, again, over 600,000 people are coming home. In this very study, 54% of the individuals were coming home within 2 years. Another 19% were coming home within 6 months. So you're not talking about people who are sort of thrown away and we can simply forget about. I think we have an obligation as a society to think about how do we want to use the moment of incarceration to do what most of us, I think, would like to see happen, and that is that individuals come home better prepared to succeed, take care of themselves and their family, become contributing tax-paying members of society. And the way you do that, clearly, one means at least, is education. It's a public good. I think we have to begin to see all forms of education in prison exactly as what it is, and that is it's a public good. So the benefits don't only accrue to that individual or those individuals, but to all of society, because if individuals can better problem solve, better communicate, better can think critically, they're more likely to be successful citizens in terms of civic engagement, getting jobs, staying out of trouble, navigating parole processes, and all the things that are a part of how one reenters and succeeds in society.
Thank you, Fred. Let's turn to John.
That's John Linton, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Good afternoon, Fred. Hello from the Hoosier State. Hey, I was going to talk about numeracy because it was highlighted so much in here, but I'd like to piggyback on a couple of quick remarks that Fred made about the public good. You know, as I listened to you, John, and Fred talk today, and then the original slides, and I'm only going to speak for Indiana, but when we're out in public working, you know, we make a point of telling people that we're not here representing correctional education, and we're not representing adult education, but we're representing training Indiana's future workforce. And that's really not empty remarks. You know, if I heard correctly in the opening remarks when we saw the slides, they were talking about numeracy being a predictor for unemployment and a predictor for incarceration. I never thought about that second part, if I understood that correctly. But you know, Fred, you were talking about on a national level the number of people coming home. Like right here in Indiana, you know, we housed probably 27,000 people this morning, and of those 27,000, 17,000 will be released in the next 12 months. And you think about that, 17,000 are going out the door in the next 12 months. And what we try to talk to people about in public is that if you took those 27,000 people, we're not that big a state. We really aren't. And if you take those 27,000 people and you can move them into the employment arena and move them, even if they're working, you know, like I think your report says 66% had jobs. Now, don't take this number to the bank, but it's a pretty solid number. Even those guys coming in that had jobs are still going to be in the working poor. In other words, they're going to be under 20,000 a year or 10,000 a year, and those are certainly not sustainable numbers. So that's my little 5-minute lecture. Is that okay with you guys? To just leave it there? But you know, you're talking about numeracy and what people are doing in correctional ed. And I was really fascinated by the lady from Virginia when she was talking about tutors. This numeracy issue I don't think is new to the United States, and I don't think it's just an issue. I know you've got household numbers to support what you're saying, but as we travel the state, this lack of literacy and numeracy skills, especially in that population 18 to 27, I think is a bigger issue than just the prison system. And some people asked me to say today what we've been trying to do here. Now this is just in Indiana to address these numeracy skills. But I think Steve Stewart's on your panel next, and we had Dr. Stewart and his crew come in and train all of our teachers how to train our incarcerated adults that had already completed their college degrees to be tutors in our formal tutors in our school with tutor pay to help us with our remedial math programs. The other thing, John, you mentioned computer-assisted instruction. Right now, we have an MOU with 4 state agencies that are pooling their resources to put computer banks and computer labs with individual servers throughout the state in our prisons, so the people enrolled in our school programs, when they need a little extra help with literacy skills and primarily math skills, they can get release time from the classroom to go into those academic labs, and it's tracked completely. I won't go into all the details, but some of the other things, you know, we're talking about training Indiana's future workforce and everything falls into place. Well, then when you talk to the guys in the prison and you talk to them about getting into school, we don't talk so much about math, but we tell them that we're going to make them proficient in basic shop math. This is the kind of math you need at every workplace you're going to go into. And then we teach a class in manufacturing measurements. And so that goes right along with it. You know, somebody, John, you mentioned earlier about the 2003 program, and I don't know if you remember, but when we were sort of shocked when we saw the results for Indiana. You know, we participated in 2003 and we did in 2014, but we were sort of shocked when we were looking at 2003. And what we did after that, and I heard somebody mention this earlier, we put in credit time programs for literacy. And so we established a definition of literacy for the adult population and said, if you meet this standard, we will give you a true 6-month time cut. There's a couple of footnotes in there, but you could knock off 183 days right off your 2-sentence if you get to it. And then over time, in response to employers, we started out at the 6th grade equivalent, then we moved to the 8th grade equivalent, and now we moved to the 9th grade equivalent. And then I read the PIAAC document I got the other day. The one thing we took away from 2003 were problem-solving skills and went right along with that. And what we did there, again, and I think Steve Stewart's there in the room, but we had his group come out and train our guys in problem-solving skills for successful reentry. So overall, from a numerical standpoint, I think we've got a pretty robust response to it. But in all honesty, we're always chasing ourselves. For example, if we come up with what we think is a really solid remedial math program to get TASC graduates, or you're talking about the GED deal, to get them ready for college level math. Now we're starting to talk about putting another remedial math class in for the remedial math class, and that's not a joke. I mean, so we said, okay, to get them college ready, we've invented this math program. Now we're talking about putting another math program in front of that. So you would go through, basically, if you were out on the streets and you were going to college, you'd be going through 2 remedial math classes before you ever take your freshman math class. And then one last comment from the report, John. If you guys look at Appendix B, and you look there on page B6, the language on the domains that they are testing, and I can send this to you, is almost identical to the language we're hearing from employers here in Indiana on the math skills that they're looking for in employees. And I thought that was really fascinating, that you've got this international report and the domains the words are almost the same, and in some instances they're in the same order of words. So I applaud whoever did that for that, because just from an Indiana perspective, that matches up totally with what we're doing. And what I think we can do is we use the 2003 report to, like I told you, build credit time and build extra capacity to deal with the literacy problems and set aside the GED issues and the TASC issues for the moment, but to do that. And I'm not just saying this, but on this little short document I've been going through here, I think we're going to have the same opportunity to use this to lay the foundation for further expansion, because it gives it just more credibility than us running around saying we need to do it. Fair enough?
Thank you, John. We appreciate that very much. And I wanted to mention that we saw some good head nods in this room when you mentioned about the numeracy issue being beyond the scope of just our incarcerated. And I did want to just reinforce the comment that you made about the introduction of a procedure by which you reduced prison sentences based on educational attainment. And I think that's being viewed in many states as a kind of a best practice in justice reinvestment, to combine a opportunity to reward preparation for release success with a reduction in time served, and to have a direct savings in correctional operations that way. And that's really a very notable practice that you folks in Indiana have been a lead on. I did have a couple of questions.
John, yes, go ahead. Can I make a quick comment about that credit time thing?
Please do.
I try not to give advice, and I can't see everybody in that room, but it sort of works backwards. You know, if you go out and if you got the research to demonstrate that you have a program in your system that effectively reduces recidivism, and it's unquestionable, you can't challenge it, then it becomes remarkably easy then to get the legal foundation in place to do the credit time, because it's a valued outcome at the end. And then one last footnote. What the credit time has done for us is that 18 to 27-year-old group that doesn't want to go to school, that doesn't want to sign up, and for a great percentage of those guys, they wait till they get to be about 32 or 34 years old, and they're back in prison for the second time. Then they start to sign up. But that is a really good tool for getting them enrolled the first time, and then maintaining persistence. And a lot of guys will tell you, oh, I didn't ever want to do this. I just did it for the time cut. But by the time they make it either into the big time vocational programs or they get through the TASC and the high school equivalency, they'll shake your hand. Yeah, they'll thank you for it. That's my advertising speech for the day.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. We're very close to out of our time, but I did want to just mention a couple of the questions that had come in. There's a question about recidivism rates in relationship to education and educational participation, and I'm pleased to be able to defer that question to the second panel because we'll have a very distinguished criminologist, Lois Davis, speaking to that issue and to what we know about the actual benefit, recidivism benefit of educational participation during a spell of incarceration, and particularly about the cost benefit of that as we talk about justice reinvestment. We also had a question about justice reinvestment from the standpoint of using those resources to support work to head off the school to prison pipeline. And the questioner was asking if we, in fact, if there are practices with regard to that. And my response to that would be to say that in these justice reinvestment issues or justice reinvestment initiatives are really at the state level where we're saving state dollars for incarceration, not really federal programs, and that there's a very active, and there should be a very active and fulsome discussion at the state level about what the best uses for those dollars are that we've been spending inappropriately, the large number inappropriately on this bare bones incarceration, too many people incarcerated too long. I think that a portion of those dollars should be spent on improving our rehabilitation programs in correctional institutions, but obviously we want to spend more also on prevention on the front end. And so that's an opportunity for a very productive discussion at the state and local level in terms of what initiatives are effective and which ones we should be investing in particularly. I did want to also...
Can I just add to that? So one of the things John mentioned is that Vera, we're leading this national initiative called Reimagining Prison, and it's sort of, so justice reinvestment is how do you take the current system and do some things to create savings and then reallocate that hopefully towards rehabilitative and some front-end things. We're saying that's incremental and it's important, but also it's time to take a step back and imagine a whole different system. So by 2030, what does incarceration in the U.S. look like? Being clear on what we attempt to accomplish when we send someone there. We anticipate a much smaller footprint of incarceration, but really thinking about how do you then sort of use incarceration and design it in a way that fits with what most of us expect when a person sort of comes home on the back end. And the only other thing I want to add before we run out of time is I just want to encourage NCS, as when you think about the lay of the land in terms of the way incarceration has changed, for your next survey, there are large numbers of state prisoners now housed in local jails, particularly in the Tennessee, in California, Pennsylvania, where by statute they're actually doing 3, 4, 5-year sentences. And so I think we need to sort of be nimble enough as incarceration changes to think about that and how that might impact on some of the findings.
Do we have time for one more question? One more quick one? Or I'm getting the time signal, and yet I just really want to continue this conversation. I just wanted to get one question that come into Fred, and that was, I think, something that's really worth discussing, and that is this tension between providing opportunities for advanced education. At the same time, we're facing challenges to provide basic educational services. And Fred, I wonder if you'd just like to, as a person that kind of represents the movement towards additional higher education opportunities in prisons, if you'd like to comment about how we can strike that balance.
Yeah, so I think the key is that post-secondary education actually lifts all form of educational attainment. And so in places where you actually have post-secondary education, you see greater attainment in terms of adult basic ed skills, in terms of completion of GED and high school diploma, because people have something to aspire to. I mean, it sort of makes sense when you see that there's this next level. And all you have to do, for instance, is to go to a college graduation in a prison environment, and you will often find that those who are in progress towards a GED or who have gotten a GED but aren't sure what they want to do yet, they then at that graduation realize, wow, this is powerful, this is transformative. They see the families there with the graduates, and then many of them at that moment make the commitment that I want that thing. So it has, I think, this effect of raising all levels of attainment, which is a win-win.
Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, John.